And good morning, Internet. I see Fish and Golf with First Blood. There's Pitt Danny. And this morning, guys, we are going to be talking about the new so-called Senate border bill. And I say so-called, and I'm going to have you a little explanation for that. My disdain for this bill is difficult to overstate. So let's run the intro and then we'll get into this and why Ted Cruz rightfully says, don't vote no, vote hell no. Good morning. All right. So, the Senate bill from H.R. 815, being called the Senate border bill, just dropped. And let's get a little background first. Let's talk about this a little bit, because here's what you've been told. Here's what they've been telling you. That Donald Trump is responsible for the current border crisis because Donald Trump personally interfered and ordered Mitch McConnell to kill the Senate bill and prevent Joe Biden from closing the border, where we're having not just record illegal border crossings, but I cannot stress this enough. There's cartel involved here, right? There's Mexican drug cartels involved here. There are other than Mexican drug cartels involved here. There are terrorist organizations involved here, and the Chinese Communist Party are involved here. And they all have one major thing in common. They are making billions of dollars off of human trafficking. Not to overstate the problem. The fact of the matter is that today, February 5th, 2024, today, there are more slaves, people involuntarily held in servitude, than at any point in world history. There are more slaves today than ever. And a large percentage of those slaves are child sex slaves and and adult sex slaves, but a large part of that industry is sex slavery. It should not be lost on any of you that the same people that are actively defending the proliferation of the support of pedophilia through organizations like Disney and other LGBT rights groups that are actively pro what they refer to as minor attracted person, and who are shouting slogans in the street like, "We're here, we're queer, and we're coming for your children." Right? The San Francisco Gay Men's Choir singing, "We'll convert your children." The same people that are voted for and funded by those groups, and by that I mean Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, the Democrat national establishment, are actively working to support the traffic in human flesh that is a major part of this border crisis. Now, America First Legal has a pretty solid breakdown of what they refer to as the top most concerning problems with the so-called Senate border bill. But I want to show you another problem. It's being referred to as the Senate border bill. Here it is. Here's the bill. And full disclosure, guys, I've read through a large portion of this bill this morning. As you can see, I've got several pages earmarked on separate tabs to discuss. But frankly, the other pages that I'm going to talk about this morning are earmarked basically as reference, referring to what they reference and how deep into the bill you have to get there. I say again, this is the so-called Senate border bill. This is what it's being referred to. Part of that is the Russell conjugation, the emotional linguistic use. To call this the Senate border bill is a grotesque propaganda. I mean, absolutely grotesque propaganda. It's being referred to in the news, like here's from AOL.com, U.S. Senate unveils $118 billion bill on border security. Oh, and there's a little aid for Ukraine and Israel in there as well, right? Washington, the U.S. Senate on Sunday revealed a $118 billion bipartisan border security bill that would also provide aid to Ukraine and Israel, but it promptly slammed into opposition from the House of Representatives. I urge Congress to come together and swiftly pass this bipartisan agreement, President Joe Biden said, also praising the migration measures in the bill, which took months to negotiate. And what you're being expected to believe is that it's the whole border crisis is Trump's fault because he told Mitch McConnell to block a bill to allow Biden to shut down the border. Let me clarify something for you. Joe Biden is the President of the United States of America. U.S. Constitution, Article 4, Section 4. He has not only the authority, but the constitutionally required duty to which he took an oath to faithfully uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. He has a duty to shut down the border and guarantee to the individual states their sovereign state security and a Republican form of government. Now, a little clarification. When the Constitution refers to a Republican form of government, it does not mean, and most of you should understand this, but that does not mean that he has to guarantee that there are Republicans the party of Republicans in charge. That's a very different thing. They're talking about the representative republic, wherein it is not a mob rule, psychopathic, semi-anarchical, everybody votes on every single issue, Democrat maelstrom, right? It means that we elect representatives with the expectation that they will faithfully represent our interests and our desires and requirements within the context of legislating law and constructing that in an organized and intelligent manner, rather than the alternative, because there are only two alternatives to that have ever been present in recorded history, and those are the so-called Democrat option, which is everybody votes on everything and you have the rule of the tyrannical minority. I'm not going to go into that too much. We could do another show on the idea that pure democracy is not rule of the majority, but rather the rule of the tyrannical minority. But it's basically you have that, or you have some mechanism of tyrannical autocracy, some monarchy, dictatorship, etc., some iron fist, one strong man, Hitlerian, Mussolini type of situation. Xander asks, so here's my question. What's the alternative? The status quo that we've had for decades? Isn't this a start that we can expand on? A foot in the door, we've done nothing for decades, and here we are. Are you asking about the bill? Because let me get back to I'm going to need some clarification on your question, Alex, but I'll be happy to dig into it. So Biden has not only the authority, but the legal obligation to shut down the border. And he's refusing to do it. Make no mistake, what's happening at the border is not only happening because Joe Biden wants it to happen and is going out of his way not to enforce the law and allow criminals to break the law. But as we've seen with CPB agents tearing down border fence and razor wire and the like, actually going down and opening the fence and standing there and opening the fence while there's hundreds of criminal aliens, hostile foreign invaders waiting to cross the fence. We've got CPB agents going down, cutting the fence and pulling it out of the way and actually gesturing to welcome these people through. So Biden and his cronies and his subordinates are not only refusing to do what they're required to do and secure the border, they are actively facilitating the invasion. Now, there's a great case to be made that there's a whole lot of China involved in this, right? There were several great documentaries that just happened to come out over the last week or so, not least of which are the Steven Crowder expose on illegal marijuana operations in Oklahoma, where what's happening is so in Oklahoma, it is legal to grow and sell marijuana, right? Land is cheap there. And what's happening is the Chinese are actually running large marijuana growing operations, which in and of themselves would be legal, except that they happen to be using a lot of quote unquote undocumented slave labor. They're using a lot of slave labor to run these farms. That summary is a gross oversimplification of the problem, but that's worth looking into. If you get a chance, go watch Steven Crowder's expose on the Chinese grow operations in Oklahoma. That's actually a fascinating piece of work. Right. Another piece of this is the I think it's called ALO, the organization that owns Pornhub and all of the major porno industry. And running those websites, they are actively involved in a lot of, actively involved. They're actively profiting, actively knowingly and willfully profiting off of a lot of that same sex trafficking, child trafficking work. And there's a lot of Chinese involvement in that as well. basically everything Yuri Bezmenov said that the KGB was going to start doing in the mid-70s to destroy the American family, demoralize the American man, emasculate the American hero, and make whores and deviants out of your children. All of that stuff that the KGB was supposed to start doing in the mid-70s and early 80s, which we see clear evidence of the effects of, is being actively done by China currently as well. And a big part of that is their push through the border. So before I dig into the America First legal hit points on the big items that you should be aggravated and concerned about, let me get back to the bill itself. Here's what I want you to understand about the bill. As they're calling it the Senate Border Security Bill, let's read the beginning of this. To amend Title 38 United States Code to make certain improvements relating to the eligibility of veterans to receive reimbursement for emergency treatment furnished through the Veterans Community Care Program and for other purposes. Now, hold on. You might think, oh, Lowry, that's easy. You just pulled up the wrong bill. No. Here on page 39, that's right, all the way down on page 39, we see the first mentions of migration. And it's $3.4 billion of money being sent to fund migration and refugee assistance, and specifically mentions that money being used to fund certain NGOs. But wait, we get all the way down to, that's the wrong one. We get all the way down to page 62 before border security is mentioned in anything other than a referencing the future page capacity. So let me go back to the beginning of it. So they open it up by tying the whole bill to the idea of giving more money to disabled veterans and the like. Let me be clear. I just pointed out that they don't even get into the border security stuff until page 62 of 370. It's 370 pages. I haven't read the whole thing, but I can tell you this. Veterans are not mentioned before they get to the border security point. Instead, we get, short title, Emergency National Security Supplement Appropriations Act 2024. And for the rest of the pages until about page 30, until about page 32, it's just a list. Department of Defense military personnel. So for an additional amount for military personnel, Army, $207 million will be left available. $3 million for the Marine Corps. $23 million for the Air Force. $4 million for the Space Force, et cetera, et cetera. I went through this and added it up. And you can see down the side here, there's by the time we get through all of the military appropriations, which, by the way, are all to remain available until December 31st, 2024, to respond to the situation in Ukraine and for related expenses. By the time we get to page 31, where it finally starts talking about border security, where it finally mentions, it doesn't even start talking about border security on page 31. That's not until page 62. As of page 31, it just talks about giving a couple of $1 million, several $1 million, in fact, to NGOs for refugee assistance programs. And it stops and gives money to FEMA before it gets to the border security thing. And by the time you get down to the border security thing, it still hasn't mentioned any money given for the veterans stuff that the bill starts by mentioning. And by the time you get through all the military appropriations for Ukraine and Israel, we've spent $116 million of the 118. Right. This is being called in the press a $118 billion border security bill. So that the Democrats could say, oh, hey, look, Joe Biden wants to spend $118 billion on border security. Bullshit. He wants to spend $116 billion on Israel and the Ukraine, the majority of which is earmarked for Ukrainian crap. And in fairness, it looks like a lot of this is meant to go toward military spending, as in weapons acquisition and stuff of the like. And then finally, on page 62, after they've already spent nearly 90% of the $118 billion that are being mentioned in relation to the spending here. Okay, I'll come back to that, Alex. Finally, on page 62, it's spent $116 billion already. And now they're starting to talk about border security and combating fentanyl Supplemental Appropriations Act. Okay. Which means that the mere statement $118 billion border security bill is a fucking lie. Make no mistake about that. It's an absolute lie. Now, let's get into the point-by-point breakdown from America First Legal. Guys, America First Legal is really doing the Lord's work on this one. I'm going to slide my fat face over to this other corner so we can see this image better. America First Legal on X. The new Senate border bill is out, and we're evaluating it. Here are 10 things you should know to start with. In sum, it appears to be worse than current law. So, first off, it does not end catch and release. Instead, it facilitates catch and release for certain populations. This would be a major red flag for all. This should be a major red flag for all. See, it's section 235B. I don't see where it says what page that is, but oh, there you go. Page 116. So about 50% of the way through the bill. Provisional non-custodial removal proceedings. Part 2, right? Release from custody. Aliens referred for proceedings under this section shall be released from physical custody and processed in accordance with the procedures described in this section. One of the big problems that we're having with these hostile foreign invaders and the way that they're able to get in, circumvent the system, and stay is they arrive at the border. They're handed somewhere between $3,500 and $8,000 in either cash or gift cards and a smartphone that's funded by the taxpayer dollar. They're then given a court date, some 2, 3, 5 years into the future. The justification, the rationalization for the smartphone is, well, they need the smartphone so that we can call them and contact them. They can call us and contact us. And we know that they have a calendar so that they don't forget their court date, and a clock so that they can show up on time for the court date. Right? So right off the rip, before we start talking about Social Security fraud and all the other welfare benefits that are being given to these people, and before we start talking about the question of whether or not the illegals are going to vote, and reminding people that, hey, it doesn't really matter that much if they vote right now, because what's happening is in 4 years or in 6 years, we're going to have another census, and they're going to be counted as part of the population because the Democrats obstructed Trump on changing the 2020 census to include the citizenship question. And so any state that gets crammed with these illegals gets an extra couple of votes in the House and an extra couple of electoral college votes in the general. Before we get to any of that, we're just handing $5,000 to $10,000 of taxpayer cash to these hostile foreign invaders to the tune of millions of dollars a day, billions of dollars a year. And that's before they get to cause any real harm. Xander says, but again, what's the hard line? What's the alternative? The hard line has simply failed. No, it hasn't. No, that's simply false. The hard line has not failed. Donald Trump ran the Remain in Mexico policies, etc., and those were very, very effective. We're looking at what we're looking at now because as soon as Biden got into office, he got rid of the Remain in Mexico policy. He ramped up the catch and release programs so that they release more, and they've been abusing the child separation. What do they call it? It's child separation deal. I forget I forget the name of it, but it's off that one Florida case. And the children, the child separation thing is a major loophole and vulnerability that we'll get to in a minute. Hopefully, I'm running out of show and I'm not running out of material yet. But even that, the Remain in Mexico policy, hey, it's our border. We have every right to defend that border. There's no good reason that an obvious hostile invasion should not be met with military force. No reason at all. I mean, I don't understand how you can say the hard line failed. Trump was very effective in curtailing illegal crossings. Yes, there were more crossings under Trump. There were more deportations under Obama. But as soon as Trump was out of office, those crossings exploded. I mean, just went over the top. So point number 2 from America First Legal, it exempts UAC from the new break glass removal authority. So what they're talking about with the break glass removal authority is the 5,000 entries thing. So there's a provision. God, it's hard to even explain because it's so convoluted. So let me pull up the break glass thing. The new break glass emergency authority is a disaster. The secretary may use it if there are 4,000 or more aliens encountered each day, but he must use it when there are more than 5,000 a day over a week or 8,500 in a single day. Those are insane numbers and totally unacceptable to the American people. That's 5,000 a day across all points of entry, to answer your question, Scrimshaw. So basically it says that they can shut down the border for that day if they're averaging 4,000 or more over a 1 week period, and they must shut down for the day if they average 5,000 a day over a week or 8,500 in a single day. And that is just way too much. But what I was saying about the UAC is unaccompanied alien children, right? The unaccompanied minors. And it exempts UAC from the new break glass removal authority, which means that you can have 5,000, you can have 8,500 adult hostile foreign invaders bring 100 children apiece without initiating the break glass removal authority to prevent their entry. And like I've already pointed out, and as has become very, very clear from Biden's personal involvement, that's the point. The child trafficking operation is the point of the whole invasion. They're trying to, it's being clouded with political questions, political ramifications. But what's really going on here, right? Oh, we're going to have illegal aliens voting in elections, et cetera, et cetera. Yes. And that's a problem that reasonably merits ballistic, violent solutions. But let's be clear, that problem is a distraction from the real problem, which is Barack Obama brought slavery back. Under the Obama administration, open-air slave markets became a thing again, all over Africa. And now, there are more slaves in the world than at any time in history. The party of opposition to abolition, the Democrat Party, the party of Jim Crow, the Democrat Party, the party that nigh to a man opposed the Civil Rights Acts, both of them, the Democrat Party, the party that signed the Defense of Marriage Act and instituted Don't Ask, Don't Tell, that party is individually and particularly responsible for the reintroduction of mass market slavery to the planet Earth. And they've done it in just over 20 years. That party wants you to re-elect their senile, pants-shitting octogenarian because they want 4 more years to expand their slave trade. World War III, child soldiers, slave trade. That's what we're looking at going into the next general election. So, I'm gonna have to put a pin in it there. Got to get out the door. Thanks for watching this morning, guys. Hit those buttons, like, share, subscribe, and we love you. And I'll see you tomorrow.